I think we're back live on the Dane by Local Community Channel. Thanks for tuning in again today and for watching these videos, as it's really important for all of us to stay connected during this time. That's one of our goals here on the Dane by Local Community Channel, is to help our community stay connected, help Dane by Local communicate with you and members that are doing great things right now for all of us during this time, and just for us to keep that community feel going, because it's really, really important. So before we jump into today's episode, I do want to remind you that I'm Jason Hafman, a board member for Dane by Local. There may be some opinions given during the show. Those are the opinions of myself or the guest, not necessarily reflective of Dane by Local itself. But we are trying to talk about a lot of different things happening with this health crisis. And one of the things directly has been highlighted by Community Shares of Wisconsin, and they have taken action, which they always do, right, Sherry? So Sherry Dubiel is joining us today to talk more about this current health crisis, CSW, and a lot of things that are happening around the area.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, Sherry, it's good to see you again, even if it's just virtually.
Yeah. We realize we're just not very far away from each other in McFarland, so.
So, I heard a lot, and obviously there's so many different things happening right now around our community, and different people doing things to try to help and step up, and on top of everything else that's being done with the government. But Community Shares has long been an organization that's taken action when you've noticed things that action needs to be taken on. So can you talk to us about how the CSW staff, yourself, has really kind of reacted to this health crisis?
Sure. So Community Shares of Wisconsin, for those who aren't aware, we are a federated fundraising organization, essentially, and we have a membership-based structure. And so every nonprofit who receives funding from Community Shares of Wisconsin is a member of Community Shares. And so our response when the government decided to pass a safer at home order and offices started to close was first of all to reach out to our member groups, because we felt like before we focus on raising any money or providing any support, that we wanted to hear what they're experiencing, what they need. And what we found overwhelmingly from our member groups in conversations was, first of all, just making the transition to working at home. Most of our folks are transitioning to working at home. And the daily details, we set up a Zoom account that we share with our member groups and little things like that. But of course, the main issue that's on everybody's mind is funding. And for nonprofits, funding, for most nonprofits, you're not developing revenue by selling something or having a store open. You're developing revenue through grants or fundraising events or individual donations. And so what we found from our member groups was that they are very nervous about the impact of this crisis on their operations and their ability to pay their staff to continue doing the work that they're doing.
Yeah, you bring up fundraising events. I mean, that's a huge way to raise funds for so many nonprofits. What are nonprofits doing? What is Community Shares doing to help, especially groups that use those type of things to help raise dollars for support?
Well, unfortunately, a number of groups have either postponed or canceled events, especially events that were scheduled for this immediate period of time after the safer at home order was put in place. And other groups that had more time, for example, Wisconsin Literacy, they have a luncheon every year where they celebrate different literacy heroes, people throughout the state who are working in different literacy networks and literacy groups to help folks. They transitioned their event to a virtual event. And one of the things they did was they patched together some interviews with the keynote speaker and the winners of awards, and they created a program that was broadcast live into YouTube, similar to what we're doing here. And so people are getting very creative about ways to communicate, learning more about some of these capabilities that we have with Zoom and YouTube and Facebook. Luckily for Community Shares, we've been doing the Big Share for so many years, and so we have a little more familiarity and comfort with communicating on social media and creating videos and that type of thing. But there's, a lot to learn, and there's a lot to navigate. And people who are in crisis or providing emergency response don't really have the capacity all the time to learn some new functioning within Zoom. So it's, and then, as far as relationships with donors and sponsors, just working really hard to maintain relationships and keep folks updated on the work that they're doing, so that when it's ready to ramp up, and for most of our groups, they haven't stopped working. In fact, I know we'll be talking about some of the groups that, their response to COVID-19 crisis is what prompted us to move forward with our fundraising campaign.
So let's talk about that fundraising campaign, Fund for a Just Recovery. Tell us about it, please.
Sure. So as we were, ourselves acknowledging the changes and, worrying, having our own concerns about our own budget, and thinking about how we will respond to the crisis, and acknowledging the great work that so many other groups have done in the community, raising money for nonprofits for more of an emergency response. One of the things that was really important to me and to the Board of Community Shares is acknowledging that there's a lot of work being done by member groups of Community Shares to highlight some of the issues that are coming up. And, we have had groups like NAACP and Kids Forward working on evaluating and advocating policy to address systemic inequalities, specifically related to race and ethnicity. And here COVID-19 started happening, and all of these policy issues and concerns that have been communicated for so many years, we're watching them in real time, the implications of the impact of the different funding that's available, the different types of jobs that people have, and how low paid folks who have very little choice in whether or not their job continues. They, losing, for example, the first wave of folks that everyone was concerned about were people in the service industry, working in restaurants and bars. And, a lot of those folks don't have health insurance. And so if we are working on a recovery of the system and that we live in, we realized that, hey, wait a minute, the way things were going was not actually great for everybody. A lot of people are comfortable in our country, but a lot of people are not, and a lot of people experience the implications of systemic issues that mean that the policies that are in place, the rules that are in place, the laws in place, whether or not it was intentional, and people can debate whether or not people put laws into place that intentionally discriminate, but sometimes the implications are that things aren't obviously going great for everybody. And so if we're working on creating a recovery and bringing our systems back and bringing our economy back, how about we pause and think about, what does that mean? And do we have an opportunity now, rather than just rushing in and, oh, let's just go back to what we had? Let's take time to listen to what these groups have been saying for all these years. And here's this opportunity for us to call into question, to highlight some of these disparities that are happening right now. We are seeing it, the statistics, new analysis, news coming out about the implications of some of these decisions that are being made. and just seeing how it's being highlighted just in these past, is it months now, a couple of 6 weeks, something like that, since all of this started transpiring. So we felt like it was really important before we just go back to business as usual, that we are intentional about taking time to evaluate the systems that are in place. And also what was a big concern to me as the Director of Community Shares is that a lot of the nonprofits that are members of Community Shares do more advocacy-based work and education-based work. And so they maybe weren't as eligible for a lot of the emergency funds that were available. And so, but a group that is like the League of Women Voters, that is ensuring that we have safe elections, that work is, in my view, as important as, or important in different ways than the type of emergency response that we're seeing, which are also extremely important. And we certainly don't suggest that those aren't important issues to address, but if we're not being thoughtful and careful in the way we are rushing to recovery, we could end up being an even less equitable society than we were before, because the implications of this could be that even more people don't have access to healthcare, or even more people can't pay their rent or pay their mortgage, that type of thing. So we feel like the time, while it's difficult to be focused this way, it is not a good time for us to stop funding groups doing advocacy work. It's not safe for us to say that, well, you know, Kids Forward, they do mostly policy work. They'll be, you know, fine. But we need groups like these groups, like the ACLU, to be pointing out and doing this research and filing lawsuits, like Midwest Environmental Advocates, reinforcing their commitment to conservation and environmental policy right now, because right now is a really vulnerable time for industry, for individuals, obviously, for the most part.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this whole pandemic and situation, the way it's affected our community in so many different ways, so many different levels. And it's created, I mean, there's so much information all the time. There's so many different things happening and changing for all of us. So it ends up being this situation where, like you said, you can forget about it's easy to forget maybe about some of these really important things that are out there that then ultimately impact and reshape some of our society moving forward as we get past this. And those are things that are important to not forget right now. So
Right.
I love highlighting that.
Right.
Before we get into one scenario I wanted to bring up, which is kind of going back to what you talked about a little bit before. I did want to say, like, fundraising right now, because I look at it myself. You know, I work for Project Home and help raise funds for the organization. You know, I don't know where to start at this point. Like, how do you go to ask for money during this time? It's really difficult. Can you talk to us a
Right.
little bit about what you've heard from members on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the response is a little different depending on your current situation. Like, we just completed the big share right the week before the Safer at Home order was passed. And so we felt like, oh, wow, just by the skin of our teeth, we just got done with one of our biggest fundraising events. And so we were thinking, well, gosh, you're just sending email upon email and letters and social media posts asking for money. And so we, you know, took a couple of weeks to just, you know, put out some basic updates that, you know, we're working from home, dialing back, and talking with our members about what they need. And then we decided, and this was after a lot of research too, and that's one thing, this pandemic, there are so many resources available online for people who need help with figuring out this kind of thing. But we decided that one of the most important things was to reach out to our regular donors and just keep in communication with them, make sure they know that we appreciate them and keeping them updated on our activities. And so now that we're kicking off this new campaign, we are, we're not just jumping out and saying, oh yeah, remember we just asked you for money. Well, now we're asking you for this and you didn't hear from us, but too bad. Obviously, no. So, and that's, donor relations is similar to sales. So anybody who's listening who has some kind of sales or their account executive, it's the same kind of thing. And, I've been getting amazing support from all the account execs at all the different businesses that we work with. And so I've been so grateful to the wonderfully kind and generous business owners in the community and their great staff who are all just trying to figure all this out at the same time. So yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to try to do that, but
Right.
luckily I think, if you're an organization, you've built up those relationships, now's the time to communicate with them, let them know what you're doing and that you're still here, you're still committed to the mission, and you understand that they might be going through some struggles too. And so if we stick together, we're going to come out of this all together the same.
Right.
So,
right. And the focus of this campaign is on our member groups as well. So we applied for a PPP loan. Excuse me, my thing automatically mutes on me sometimes. We applied for a payroll protection program loan. And so we felt like, well, at least for the immediate future, we feel secure with the amount of money that we have so we can continue our staff. I mean, we're short by one staff person, but we're not going to be filling that role anytime soon because we want to make sure we can weather the financial storm here. But we decided that our member groups, who the majority of the funds that we distribute to our 70 member groups throughout the year come from pledges that are made in workplace giving campaigns. And so, one of the things that we started getting worried about is, how can we fulfill the expectations that our members have for the funds that they'll be receiving from us if we're not even sure of all these pledges that were made last fall, who even still has a job? If you're a state employee and you made a generous pledge, but then your partner lost their job, you're making different decisions at this point than you were 6 months ago. And so we felt like it was really important that at the very least, the members of Community Shares, we want them to be able to count on the amount of funding that they were hoping to get from us this year. And so what we decided to do was a special campaign specifically that all the funding that will be collected will be used to shore up any shortfalls in our workplace giving campaign collection through this calendar year. And so we are committed, in our workplace giving and in other systems, we pass on 100% of donations to our members, and we were committed to that for this campaign as well. And so I think that is a different message as well for donors, that you're not donating to Community Shares so we can get an extra Zoom account. You're donating so that we can make sure the members who are doing this important work that we need can continue doing their work, because right now is not a good time for a group like ACLU to not have money, because or of course Kids Forward, like I said. And there's also some really cool, innovative collaborations going on, and that has always been the case at Community Shares, where by the very nature of these groups coming together for quarterly board meetings and serving on committees together, people who work in similar issue areas come together naturally, and they get to know each other through Community Shares. And so we've had some really exciting collaborations just since the pandemic. One of them is between 3 of our member groups, REAP Food Group, Rooted, and Fair Share CSA Coalition. And they've developed a program to purchase food from local farms and producers, and they provide these boxes of food to families during the crisis. And so that's just one example. Another really great example that I like to highlight is the example of Disability Rights Wisconsin joining up with Wisconsin Council of the Blind and Visually Impaired to respond to what was going on in the planning for the election, the spring election, trying to delay it and or do as much as we can to encourage absentee balloting, that type of thing. So, and when you are working with a group like a coalition of disability rights groups, understanding that they're thinking of the people who are going to have the hardest time meeting our civic duty as a voter. So making sure that we are hearing from them what needs to be done so that we can make voting as safe for everybody as possible. Because we don't want election to take place where, well, your vote counts if you can make it to the polling place and if you have good health insurance. So if you get COVID-19, you'll be able to go to the doctor and get a test, or, you know what I mean? If you're a person who doesn't have health insurance or a person who can't get around town, doesn't have safe transportation, those are issues that we need to keep in mind so that our freedoms and liberties and civic responsibilities that we have can be met by everybody in the community.
Yeah, I think those scenarios are out there for a lot of people, you know, and you talk about it, there are different challenges with transportation, with, you know, just maybe the ability to get to a polling place, things like that. I mean, I'm certainly hopeful that that the upcoming elections are much more thought out in the approach and what they're going to be able to do for people, because I know a lot of people were kind of in a race to get absentee ballots, and there's some challenges with that, some other things happening, and you know, we're just hopeful that between groups that are working to help for those things and then the, you know, the government groups, that they get that figured out.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So we're hoping that the Fund for a Just Recovery is another opportunity for members of the community who are as focused as we are on making sure that these efforts that we're making are ensuring that everybody has access to the benefits that are coming out of this. For example, Voces de la Frontera, which is a relatively new member of Community Shares of Wisconsin, giving voice to immigrant farm workers who pay income tax and Social Security tax, but they didn't receive any of the emergency stimulus checks that came out. And so, you know, there's people who have differences of opinion on that, but if it's based on taxes and Social Security and that type of thing, and they are providing food for us and they're emergency workers, it seems pretty inequitable that they would not also receive these emergency stimulus checks. So those types of things that the average person going about their day, living in McFarland with their kids and, you know, just thinking about getting to the grocery store, and I'm talking about myself, and, you know, getting the car, the oil change on the car. I mean, just how different it is when you don't have those same privileges, or you, like, people I know who can't get to the grocery store. And so getting groceries at this time, it's hard enough for the average person, but if you don't have reliable transportation and your food share was cut, and I mean, it's as simple as just having a meal to eat. It you know, in a country, yeah, it seems like it's not really fair for not everyone to have access to these same things.
I want to go back to something you talked about and brought up earlier, and it was, you know, it's kind of highlighted through some of the Kids Forward work that had been done recently, some studies they examined, and just presenting some scenarios. But let's talk about this scenario. Um, I'm a I'm a person who works in a service industry job. I don't make a lot of money, certainly lower on the income scale than many people, and well below the median income for the area. Um, then I also most likely don't have the same type of ability for paid sick leave, time off. Those are some of the things that are facing so many people. And not only that, I think, so you have limited sick time. You don't make a lot of money anyway. So what's your alternative? Is
Right.
to just not go to work? Do you lose your job then? I mean, all of these stressors and all these things that would be on someone's plate in that circumstance. I just can't. I mean, there's just so much there to digest, and it's
Right.
a very real scenario for so many in our community. I think it's something that needs to be highlighted more, and that's why I appreciate, Kids Forward, Community Shares, all these different groups trying to make sure that those people also have a voice, because it's critical. Like, put yourself in those shoes. Just think about it. What do you do? And then you start to become sick. Do you go to work?
Right.
Because do you not go to work because you shouldn't? Like, what do
Right.
you do in that situation?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I know when this first was put in place, and I went to the grocery store a couple times, and the people stocking the shelves, I was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for working. And they were like, well, I don't get paid if I don't work. So you can call me a hero if you want, but I gotta pay the bills just like anybody else. And so I think you're absolutely right that, you don't, the choice of whether or not to go into the office if you're feeling sick, not everybody has the same opportunity to make that choice, and not everybody has the opportunity that I have to do work from my home and be safe and avoid contracting this. So I think there's lots of flaws in our current system that it's going to be urgent and important for us to continue to be mindful of those things, so that as we work to recover our economy, that we don't want to make things worse. I mean, let's take this opportunity to try to make things better.
It's always forward thinking with you guys. I know that's the way, but that's how we make advancements and make things better. Sherry, talk a little bit more. Do you have any other examples of creative collaborations and ways people are trying to work through the scenario and still keep themselves going, still keep up the good work they're doing?
Yeah. Uh, I know that we have a number of groups that are doing their own fundraising campaigns for their own work. I'm seeing a lot of innovative communication happening on social media. I know you've been doing these shows on YouTube, Dane by Local has already, but this is the time when this type of communication and learning these skills and using these skills is really, really important. Yeah, I apologize for not having another good example from within our membership.
You had some good ones already. I just
Yeah.
didn't want to leave any out if you had some more in the bag there. So I just
Yeah.
thought I'd reach one more time. Okay, so before we finish this up though, because you've given us a lot of good things to think about and told us a lot of important things about what groups are doing and what Community Shares is doing. Um, so the fund for a just recovery, how long is that going to be going? How can people help? Where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah, well, we just kicked it off, and you can go to our website at communityshares.com, and there's a Fund for a Just Recovery button that you can click on our menu. There's also, we are linking to it all over the place on social media and on our website. And so we plan to basically conduct the campaign. We want to reach out to specific supporters who have given in the past and make sure that they're aware of the campaign and of this extra opportunity that they have to support some of the greatest, most innovative groups in the community. And so we don't have a specific timeline on the campaign. We're hoping that it doesn't go for too long, and that we feel like we have an opportunity to return to some kind of normalcy in our workplace giving pledge collection. But yeah, so I guess we don't have a specific timeline, but I definitely encourage people to, as they're making donations right now, to think about what types of nonprofits doing what types of work that really we need to make sure that we're investing in now, so that we're not going to go backwards. We don't want to end up with an even less equitable society than we have. And again, the information is on communityshares.com, and the name of the fund is the Fund for a Just Recovery, as our goal is to make sure that any changes that are taking place are keeping in mind justice and equity.
So to make a case for urgency here, if people give, the sooner, like the money is needed now, right? For everybody. So if people give now, it's actionable dollars right away.
Absolutely. And we actually even have a $10,000 matching gift. One of our longest term, most generous donors actually came to us and offered the match. Her name is Janet Zimmerman, and she's just been a leader at Community Shares for as long as I've been involved. And so if you make your donation, she'll even match it. And so we really want to encourage people to take the time to look through the list at communityshares.com of the different member groups. If you'd rather give to one of them specifically, our regular donate system, our portal for donating has a drop down for the different member groups. So you can give that way if you'd rather do that. We've had a couple of donors make a donation to the fund and then make a few donations to their favorite nonprofits too. So
great. And Sherry, I know Community Shares, tell us where we can find you on social too, because obviously I have the website, but we can see you where else.
Yes. Oh, we are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I think that's the main ones. And LinkedIn. We have a pretty good presence on LinkedIn.
All right, good. Sherry, always good to talk with you. Thanks so much for everything you're doing over there at Community Shares, and we really appreciate it. Best of luck moving forward. Stay well, be safe, okay?
Thank you, and thank you to all the awesome Dane by Local members and business owners in our community, because you guys are the bedrock of the community, and we love you.